Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
Good morning, and thank you so much, everybody, for coming in early. It's my great pleasure to today welcome Maja Petrić to Microsoft Research for our visiting artist talk. This is something that Studio 99, a group, kind of a grassroots group at Microsoft Research of artistically minded folks, has started, and we're trying to attract both the local and international artists and try to get them here to basically start a dialogue within the community about art and the role of art within technology and the role of art within Microsoft, because it's a little bit broader topic. But it's my great pleasure today to welcome Maja. I've known Maja for several years now. We share the same country of origin, so to say, but she's a great emerging artist in the digital media domain here in Seattle. Her background is she studied at ITP at NYU, and then also she's a recent doctorate graduate from the X-Arts program here at UW. One of the great things that she works on a lot of installations, large room scale things with lighting and kind of changing the nature of space. But one of the things that's really interesting to me about it is that she has this great track record of attracting collaborators from different disciplines and working across disciplines, which is I think something that we're looking forward to. So in the past, she worked with dancers and choreographers and technologists like me. She actually seeked me out for some of the projects. So it's really been a fun collaboration. So without further ado, this is Maja Petrić.
Well, so as Hrvoje said, I'm an artist and I work on an intersection of art, technology, and science. And I will be telling you about my practice and the research that I have been doing in the last 12 years. I think that most of it can be summed up under the title Transforming the Poetic Experience of Space Through Light. So I will talk more what that means and show some examples from other artists that inspired me and from my own work. And I would say that my work is focused on changing the perception of space in functional art. And therefore, the subjects of my work have been perception, space, and art. To change perception, I have been studying sensation, experience, and phenomenology. And to create spatial situations, I have been practicing designing spaces, fabricating different materials, structures, manipulating materials, and integrating lighting and audiovisual systems inside of those spaces. And the core is always artistic, and in my work, the core has been the sublime, and it's hard to define it, and critical history has proven that the sublime cannot precisely be put into words, but I would think that for that reason it's actually important to try to figure the meaning of it. And I will talk also a little bit more about that, just to touch upon the meaning of artistic value of the works that I'm interested in. So I will give you a moment to read a quote by Immanuel Kant. Immanuel Kant recognized the sublime as intangible, that it is something to be found in a formless object. The experience of the sublime is necessary, to experience it is necessary to go beyond reason and to employ sensibility and imagination. So it's a combination of reason, sensibility, and imagination. And for him, it's not an object, it's a state of mind we must enter, and that's what enables us to experience it. And we experience it when our imagination fails to conceive the greatness of events solely by means of reason, but compensates for this failure with pleasurable sensation that can be manifested through synthesis of virtue of reason, imagination, and sensibility. In other words, for Kant, this would be the sublime. It cannot be defined, but it can be experienced. And since it is unknowable but can be experienced, I think it's profoundly valuable to find ways to experience it. And my interest is in finding those ways. So one of the first artists exploring the phenomenological experience of the sublime was English romantic landscape painter Joseph Mallard William Turner. And this is one of his most notable painting, The Snowstorm, Steamboat over Harbor's Mouth, making signals in shallow water. And it portrays a ship in a distress of the English coast with a high degree of abstraction, monochromatic palette, asymmetrical composition, and it documents the storm and the ship in the storm. But really, it doesn't use realistic techniques to just illustrate what happened, but it conveys by creating the sensation of how it must have felt to be in that storm or to be watching it from close distance. And so I think the painting doesn't only inform us about what happened to the steamboat at the harbor's mouth, but it also physically immerses us in the event. And for that reason, it's beautiful, but it's also terrifying, and it's a visual experience. And I think it creates an example of the sublime in painting because it provides the gateway to that type of experience. And I also believe that the art has a power to inspire both awe and terror, and that has a power to engage senses and provide this immediate experience. I will give you moments to read the quotes.
Just a little more.
Oh, it was fast? Okay. I will read it for you. My perception, sorry, I will go back.
Yeah.
My perception is not a sum of visual, tactile, and audible givens. I perceive in a total way with my whole being. I grasp a unique structure of the thing, a unique way of being, which speaks to all my senses at once. And I would say this also sums the success of innovative contemporary artworks that many times you do experimental manipulations of senses through which the space is experienced, both cognitively and emotionally. So their innovative use of materials engages sight, hearing, touch, smell, emotion, memory, imagination, and therefore it can transform spaces that it is situated in. So this is one example, and it's James Turrell's project, Wolfsburg project, and he's just one of the contemporary artists who has followed the lead of Richard Wagner's Gesamtkunstwerk, or the total work of art, that in 1849 intentionally included all the senses into a total experience. So they try to do art that immerses the body from all different sides. And for the last 50 years, I would say that art has been marked by meaningful treatment and inclusion of space, and also trying to find access to multiple sensory experiences of the artwork. And this example uses Gänzfeld, and it's a technique that actually stands for perceptual deprivation, and it's a phenomenon of perception caused by exposure to unstructured, uniform, stimulated field. So here, a hall of construction divided into two interconnecting chambers. It's a viewing space, is left entirely empty, and it's slowly flooded with light. that changes colors. And the way the color changes, it creates an experience of the space changing form. And this is the fact that the light has to transform the space and the experience of being in that space. I would say that such multisensory spatial art positions the body in the center, and the experience is triggered phenomenologically. And so the possibility of the sublime that I talked previously about is more direct. And a good example is this Caravaggio's amazingly visual painting. It is a representation of Saint Thomas reaching out his hand to touch the Christ. It visually portrays a story that informs us about the event, but it is so visceral that we see with our eyes the image of touch that translates into the haptic experience on our own flesh. When I look at the painting, I feel this poke in my own body, so I think that's the value of it, the experience. I'm interested in the same effect, but creating situations in space that not only stimulate vision, but also other senses and provoke this more immediate experience. So to do that, as I said, I've been studying perception and 5 basic sensory systems: visual, acoustic, taste, smell, orienting, and the haptic system, which collaborate with each other for us to experience things, but they also collaborate with emotion and imagination. And this is where artist has a lot of playroom. From the range of phenomenologically powerful tools to create the experience, I think the potential for lighting stands out. And my focus has been on studying theoretical and practical examples that lead towards discovering, interpreting, and developing novel body of knowledge for enhancing the multisensory spatial experience by use of lighting in order to transform the poetic sensation of the space. My approach focuses on the use of lighting materials that engage perception, emotion, memory, and imagination. And the subject of my research are historical and contemporary references that demonstrate this transformation, and some of them I just showed you. My technical approach combines both traditional and experimental principles of lighting design, spatial design, fabrication, audiovisual systems, and algorithmic composition. And my interest is really to exploit technological advancements that can fuse perception of senses and add to the phenomenological experience of the artistic intentions. So really to work with whatever is out there that can help reach and impact meaningfully people when they enter a space and create a poetic experience for them. This would be one of my first works that deals with what I just talked about, and it's outside in an interactive light installation that was created in 2004. So I attempted to transform the atmosphere of this utterly shuttered pedestrian tunnel. It's in New York City's subway on 191st Street of station of the number 1 train, and it's utterly shuttered and quite horrible things happen there. It's a very long tunnel, but somehow people get robbed even when other people are passing, and there was rape, and it's pretty negative space. And I was interested in how to transform the experience of it a little bit, just for a moment, and point to the contrast of that space with the rest of the environment. And I use artificial light to simulate a striking natural effect of light emanating from the sky. So I created false cracks on the ceiling and then had artificial light coming through to simulate this effect of so-called God's light. And lights were programmed to imitate the color and intensity of the daylight outside the tunnel. So when it was very, let's say, Seattle-like weather, the light inside would be bluish, whitish, and when it was very sunny, it would be bright yellow, red, and so on. This project is called As It Is Cracking, and it is an interactive light and video installation of the wall that cracks in real time. So as the wall cracks, light and video appear through the cracks to simulate the change of daylight. And that is also happening outside. So the slowly changing light changes from being frightful to pleasurable. And the daunting cracks on the wall start to crack and crack fully over the course of 8 hours. Light and moving image appear through the cracks and simulate the serene nature and daylight that is outside. But this change is interrupted by sudden and startling experience of lightning. So this is one moment where a room completely gets washed out with white light, and then it turns into this form, and really it happens in response to people's presence in the room. So throughout the course of time, the light imitates the outside light, but then there is a change when there is a recognition of people inside of the space. So the opening into the outside environment reveals the experience of calm and slow changes in the outside environment that suddenly turns into a stormy event and then goes back into calming space. Yeah?
Is there an audio component to this?
No. For this one, no. Yeah, but there could be. Yeah, there's potential for that. Yeah. It would be. It has a potential to be more sensory impactful with audio too, but at this edition there was no audio. Yeah, I was exploring how to change the sensation from something for me that feels awe-like into something that feels terrifying, and how to do this in the course of time. And I did this with light and video in this case.
How did you make the wall crack?
So it's a fake wall that is built in front of the real wall, and it's actually made of plastic, which is then covered with a very, very dry paint with some other chemicals I put inside that cracks over time. So when you have almost too dry paint, it always cracks, right? So it's kind of the same effect. And because it's transparent, it's showing really, when it starts to crack a little bit, it starts to show what's happening behind. And this project got 2 awards, Light Art Awards, Richard Kelly and Student Light Art Award. And it also was a base for other projects that followed that I'll talk a little bit about. In this project, I worked with a choreographer also on cracking the wall, but here we did something mechanical. And it is a project called The Eyes of the Skin. That I did in collaboration with Professor Jennifer Sock, who is professor at the University of Washington's dance department. And it's a dance about twisted nature of tenderness and sensitivity. So tenderness is defined as tendency to express warm, compassionate, affectionate feelings, but it also stands for pain and discomfort. And I was interested in this dichotomy and thought that a wall that cracks is both showing this fragility and beauty that she was dealing with in her dance. And it was done with mechanical solution that cracked the wall open, and also then we worked on responding with light to whatever happened in the space in terms of the narrative and dancer's movement in the space. The light would change. This is a different project. It's continuation of The Eyes of the Skin #1, but this is The Eyes of the Skin #2 actually, and it's really continued experiment with different technologies. and collaborating with lighting engineers, computer engineers, more dancers to create more powerful solution for the previous one that I just talked to you about. And we were commissioned by Henry Art Gallery to install it across their 3-floor museum. So this piece was, it was installed. You came into the Henry Art Gallery, and then on every floor there were pieces of walls that would either simulate cracks, or that in the big Strom gallery there was a large wall that provided the backdrop to the main the dance, and that was covered with another fake wall, which dancers then ripped apart to open it, to kind of peek into the cracks. And in collaboration with Hrvoje, I worked on video mapping system that then provided video, so look into the what happens inside of those cracks. I'll show you a little bit about this. So once they open the wall, you would see an image, and once they would close the wall, the image would no longer be there. Could we please have the lights down a little bit? Thank you. So the space, another outcome of Hrvoje's and my collaboration was this interactive video installation Shadow Inverted, which was exhibited last year in this building in Studio 99. And it was an experiment that examined the shadow as a place defined by an absence of light. So this interactive piece creates an inverted experience where shadows are illuminated and serve as portals into an inverted imaginary world. So what is light in the real world, it is dark in the shadow, and vice versa. And by moving through a light, a person's shadow uncovers glimpses of the world beyond, searching the unknown, and without ever being able to see it all. So really, it was using shadows, moving shadows as a map to display video of natural realms. And there are beautiful moments of people touching each other's shadows, and then those videos fusing into one. Yeah, it came out of the talks that Herve and I had about creating an experience with video and also light. And it was, I would say, a quick experiment, which just showed that there is a lot of potential in terms of creatively applying technology. Large-scale spatial installations that I show you are pretty much demanding in terms of resources. So I also do some smaller scale work, object work, but they're also on the subject of space. So this is a light installation called Skies. It's a 7-foot tall and 40 inches wide installation made of 7 modules. These are 7 boxes stacked on top of each other, and in each box there are dynamic lights that are individually programmed to present change of daylight from sunset to sunrise. And so the sky and its 7 modules are constantly changing to have this sense of ever-changing environment that's around us. My study of transforming the poetic experience of space has been reflected also in my PhD exhibit. Horizon is an imaginary line, and this is the latest big installation work that I did. And I will talk to you about it in more detail, just to kind of show what's my process. Then I will also show you examples of what was the outcome. It was utilizing experimental light and electroacoustic compositions to transform the experience of Jones Playhouse Theater. And the attempt was to transform it into poetic experience of nature. So as I said, the main medium is light, and the transformation of the immaterial sensation of light by projecting animation of simple geometric patterns and references to nature into material experience of the constructed landscape. So I created light sculptures by means of reappropriating cinematic technologies, and in that way it holds a lineage that traces back to the abstract paintings of artists like Mark Rothko and before him Turner that I talked about, where the perceptual landscape is treated as a vehicle for the sublime. And really the idea was to use light as a tool that then reaches people on not only visually, but also you can almost feel it by the sense of touch. And the way I was working with it was reappropriating technologies that are already out there, and utilizing high power projectors and programming haze to interact with it created this sensation of almost physical light. So the piece occupied the stage of Jones Playhouse Theater, which is located at the University of Washington. And it is a 1-story brick building with a small partial basement totaling around 13,000 gross square feet and sitting for 210 people in ancient Greek amphitheater style. So it's a pretty large semicircular theater space surrounded by terrace seating. At the beginning of the piece, the doors of the Playhouse Theater opened to visitors to enter directly the stage where the installation was taking place. And visitors were encouraged to explore the entire stage and the installation in their own choosing. It was completely painted with super saturated, concentrated velour black paint. And the entire seating was covered in black too, so there was absolutely no source of light. And people coming inside were pretty much disoriented because there was no reference, there was absolutely no light. Even people who worked there could not feel their way around. And it was a very interesting sensation, the total absolute darkness. Once the visitors dark adapted, their attention was grabbed by tiniest amounts of light that was composed to cover the stage of the theater in a very minimal way and to direct the gaze of viewers. I'm going to talk a little bit about technology behind this. So this is what I utilized to create the experimental lighting solution and also electroacoustic installation. And here is how it was laid out. So when you came in, it seemed just like a very open-ended space, completely bare bones, but there was a pretty elaborate installation of pieces across. And my research concentrated on digital projection as a lighting source and the interaction with fog in the air that created the sensation of light being palpable. So the experience of projection can be manipulated by positions of the projectors, and each of Panasonic projectors was positioned on one side of the theater, and together they produced one connected separate image by emitting horizontal beams of light. And so the position of projectors was completely affecting how the light was experienced, the direction of it. But then I also was using two moving, rotating projectors that were, by changing their position, they were also changing the direction of light. And there were two. One was a position above the center of the stage, and the other at the top center of the audience terrace. And both of those were programmed to move their yokes during the piece, and then I worked on reappropriating image into the sensation of light. So when you came in, you could see some image on the ground, but almost nobody paid attention to it because it was so prevailing, the sensation of light. And that's what the image was designed to do, to create a sensation of light. This is just a quick image of how the technology was connected. So I was reappropriating all the technology for this type of thing, and then I had to reappropriate the way it was coming together. And I think I can skip actually talking details about this unless you're interested. So I utilized two hazers and a fog machine during the piece, and the haze is present and maintained throughout the piece, and then the fog was introduced in key moments of the piece. So it was very much intentional when it came and where exactly it came. So it was localized, but there was also with haze and fog, and there's a very the nature of it is that it's very ever-changing, so it cannot be completely controllable. So that was also taken into consideration. Fabrication of fog and haze that is usually known as a weather phenomenon is used to imply really a natural realm and to create more of sensation of the atmosphere. And it provokes, in that way, the stronger connection with nature. And this has been done from antiquity, and there has been fascination with it, with the optical phenomenon that held a fundamental role in both inspiring and examining premises about the physical world. So the weather has been employed in science, atmospheric optics, astronomy, art history, color theory, mythology, military. And this is what interests me, is how this one thing that we all know and experience, weather and nature, from this, let's say, just a little corner from the position of fog and haze, is experienced, and it fascinates many different disciplines and how they treat it. So entire civilizations have been actually ruined, and some prospered based on their ability to predict and adapt to the climate change. So that also has a connection to what I'm trying to imply here. I'm gonna show some other works of art that used fog as their tool, and in my work I do heavy research of everything related to what I'm doing and try to learn from that. And here you can see works by Fuiko Nakaya, Diller Scofidio, Tetsuo Kondo, Kurt Henschelger, Olafur Eliasson, and all of them use fog in their work, and they treat it as a sculptural medium that is in a subtle collaboration with water, atmosphere, air currents, and time itself. Experiential and ephemeral in nature, these fog sculptures spatialize light, shadows, and sometimes also an image. And borrowing various forms of mediums and integrating them into the space of the artwork is, I think, where there is a potency for this poetic experience of space. So I try to do a step up from that, and mostly I did this by repurposing video, film, and animation to shape the light. So really, the content of projection was crucial in shaping the kinetic behavior of light and the experience of it. So these are the layers of animation used in the piece. So this is how the animation looks at the beginning, and it morphs into different shapes, and it progresses. So the shape, form, and progression of the projection generates the fluidity of light that is being sculpted in the space. And after a series of experiments with many different projections, I concluded that utilizing simple geometric forms, slowly transforming in time, are the most effective in creating almost fields of light that one can enter into and be into almost a shell of light. That then I advanced into more complex shapes, which were then implying natural forms, which also has to do a lot with things found in nature, and that is simple geometric forms which then evolved into more complex. So this is how those images that I showed you in animation form looked in space when they were projected. So the animations are created by use of the Adobe After Effects editing software and manipulated in real time by Hypotizer Media Server. So it's a tool used mostly in theater and entertainment, but not in the way I was using it. So it was interesting to see how to utilize this in my purposes, and really it provided me access to creating, animating, and composing abstract animation through keyframing, time remapping, animation, dynamic effects, color correction, computer-based lighting, 3D camera construction, adjusting the angle, all of that in real time. And all animations are produced in a layered and non-linear editing environment, then are then imported into the Hypotizer to have 8 real-time layers that were manipulated in real time. So this is again a look of stills from the animation, and complex compositing of abstract moving imagery interacts with haze and fog and results into dynamic environment of light. Could we have some lights down, please? So following image is a screenshot from the animation, and then these are like how the light fell. This is when you were inside of the light. That was the. This is looking outside and almost having a sensation you can touch it. It's very hard to document most of these works. It's something that needs to be experienced, and it's even harder to do a video. So that's why I'm kind of opting for images. But more than anything, I hope to install this piece again, and hopefully you can experience it for yourself. So the aesthetic of simple shapes, bold colors, and dynamic geometry has a heritage in also color field painting and abstract expressionism. And they combine this anti-figurative aesthetic of the European abstract styles, such as Futurism, Bauhaus, synthetic cubism, with the emotional potency of German expressionism. So this is the point where technology and art meet, and where reappropriating technology can be applied in terms of artistic value. So in previous quote, I kind of explained why I was opting for simple shapes. So it wasn't just a good solution for my experience of projection, but also it had a meaning in this work. And this is first, again, a screenshot from the animation, and then next to it on the right, you have an image of how this image felt in space. So the work looked further to approach this usage of moving image into an experience of spatial light by creating the nonlinear composition of light and sound that could be experienced in space as an extension of space that's ever changing. So really these simple shapes were becoming more and more complex during 20 minutes. And this is done in in the images you saw previously. So experimenting with the light beams coming out of the projector when playing videos deals with cinema and video art. And by this age, cinema has developed complex relationship with contemporary visual and media arts, and it is often used outside in its own context and placed into the territory of art, where in some cases becomes almost unrecognizable. And these are just examples of some other artists reappropriating cinematic technologies. So viewers are turned into participants, and in turn, their passive experience is transformed into a visually immersive experience. And such works really explore the notions of time, memory, and transition from material to immaterial. This is a composition of light, image, and sound that I did for the piece. As I said, it starts both sound and image light start with abstract forms and morph into organic, recognizable elements of nature, only to be processed again and filtered to its abstract parts. And really, it's a nonlinear dramatic arc of the piece that can be felt, seen, heard, smelled, and touched, and it leads towards the discovery of the natural environment. These are just some pictures that show the process, and I will follow by showing you images of more nature-like environment in the piece. So much like the light experience of the horizon, sounds were also derived from the cinematic reappropriation. And this is a moment where those abstract shapes are becoming evoking the sense of rain and evoking the sense of sunshine. And this is all happening in time. It's moving, it's becoming faster, and it's changing pace. There are some people here who experienced it, so you can say how it felt. It's hard to take a picture or a video once again. But the same was done with the electroacoustic composition, which was using ambisonic, meaning a 3D sound system, and you could hear different sounds at different parts of the space. And again, it was kind of following the notion of oral cinema, or Lumia cinema, meaning reappropriating cinematic technology for this experience. So it is a multisensory experience, and it really tries to balance the interaction of the body and the space with light, color, image, and sound. And the space of Playhouse Jones Theatre is transformed into an environment without defined boundaries that provokes heightened perception, awareness of this undefined space, and one's own presence in the space. Moving beams of light were both physical and thermal, both figurative and abstract, both still and dynamic. And phenomenal experience of light sound was nearly impossible to capture as they change based on the state of the fog and viewer's position in the space. So it was it was completely impossible to capture everything at once. And one had to move around the space and would experience different things. And actually, every single time the piece was shown, it also was different because of the different airflow. The fog would behave differently, and you cannot really recreate your movement. So that was interesting too. Each visitor created a silhouette in space that also contributed to the experience of the space and the total experience. And as they move, their figures at times block the haze and block the fog and block the image also, which provides them with an opportunity to interact with the environment and make immediate influence on it, and to play the play of light across the space really is transformed by the play of visitors in the space. And my plan is to keep on transforming and expanding this piece into an interactive perceptual hyperspace that I have in mind, that I would like to call, that I'm calling now, We're All Made of Light. And really, I would like to achieve the goal of creating even more impactful experience of nature in a built space. And I'm now exploring all possible ways to do that. So I'm really interested in a more compelling experience, and whatever tool can facilitate that. And I believe there is a lot of opportunities in studying light as basic, indispensable, necessary substance of the universe, which is visible and invisible energy that travels through space and enables, but also defines life. I also think it's a potent metaphor, and in my further work I would like to explore it for both being a physical and symbolic, and to explore those properties to change the experience of space. So currently I am looking into possibilities for expanding the work by incorporating projection that captures live visitors in space. So really what would happen would be employing video mapping mechanism which looks into the space to see, to capture visitors, and then project towards the visitors back their silhouettes, and really to create a space of light in the shape of their silhouette. So when one person is walking, to have an outline of light around them, and then morph that outline into different shapes and maybe different visitors. So there are many different possibilities, but the idea is that each visitors will create a light space by just being present in the space. And as they move across the space, the light will be extruded in the shape of them and leaving light trails of their presence across the space. At specific times, these volumetric light shapes will be composed to like morph into whatever will be appropriate for this piece, but I'm really interested to morph into a person that's maybe opposite or maybe was there previously. And the goal is to really experiment with technology to advance how people experience space, their presence in space, how they deal with their environment, and to offer a variety of perspectives on our nature, our origins, and our world. Another possibility that I'm contemplating about is working with scientists to utilize recent groundbreaking discovery of using ultrasound to levitate small particles around mid-air in order to move particles of haze and morph light sculptures. So using acoustic levitation to move haze, and then in that way kind of intentionally shape the kinetic light sculptures. These are some other possibilities I'm also contemplating about, but everything is now a possibility. Whatever can help create more compelling experience. And for that reason, I'm very excited to be here, because this is the place for those opportunities. And I would love to talk more with you and hear if you have any ideas of how we could make this happen. Let me know if you have any questions, or if I can go back and show any of the work again.
I do have a question.
Mm-hmm.
You were talking about the piece you did in the theater at university, and you said that it was done in real time. So were you sitting with the soundboard essentially and like affecting things, or was it on like a time sequence?
It was composed, pre-composed, but then there were eight layers of animations, which were then also manipulated real time.
Okay.
So it could run by itself, but then it also was modified based on what was happening in space. Not always. Sometimes there was no need, but sometimes it was interesting to because there were 4 projectors and they were all kind of taking certain parts of space at different moments. So there was a possibility to kind of localize different areas of space using this real-time mechanism.
I find that very interesting, where it comes together with theater in that way, because often we think of the artistic experience as something that's created and then put out into the world and just, repeated, essentially, where in this case you're having a dynamic experience, kind of like that dialogue we were speaking about earlier, that real life connection.
Yeah.
So for your work that involves light and the manipulation of light, you often need to completely control the environment. You need to close it off to prevent outside light from coming in.
You don't have to. I just, for this
But for it to be
Yeah.
as successful,
Yeah.
James Turrell has that issue too. Do you find that stressful, that you have to
this was a
lighting?
huge endeavor. It's a big theater, and even though theaters are made to be dark, there is still, exit signs, little flashlights, some reflective surfaces. The chairs have a little bit of chrome that catches light. So all of that had to go. So it was challenging to cover that. It just took a lot of effort, but it was worth it because it's so interesting to be in a space when there is no light and then to control the light that comes in. So for me, it was worth it. Yeah, for this piece.
How did you ever get being able to turn off exit signs and all sources of light in a space that has stairs? The University of Washington.
This is being recorded, right? Okay, I'll tell you later.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I can understand.
Yeah,
So is your partnership ongoing with the research group right now? Is it a formal partnership, or is it more of an informal?
Yes, I wouldn't say it's formal. I hope there is a possibility for making it formal, but yeah, I have been very much engaged with working with technology and reappropriating technology for the purpose of art, and Hrvoje is also interested in creating technology that can be used in artistic purposes, so it has been informal, kind of.
Yeah. I mean, it came together for, I think the first time we worked was for the big, the Henry exhibit, and it kind of came together pretty fast. And
Are there plans for any other exhibitions or anything on campus here?
Not right now.
Not right now.
Yeah.
The options are open.
Yes.
We're the Microsoft Art Collection here, and we have a gallery space, so it might be interesting. Right, currently we have a fairly isolated space that potentially could be purposed for something like that. So
We should talk.
yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Go for it.
On the tunnel piece that you did,
Uh-huh.
presume that you went there when it was before you got started and kind of got a feel for it and feel for the ambience, the mood of the people going through it.
Yes.
And then afterwards, did you notice any difference? Did people seem any different going through the tunnel once it was?
Unfortunately, it was a very short installation, almost a couple of hours, because of security reasons. It couldn't stay there longer. So the people who were there were a lot of people who knew it's going to happen, and then there are also people who just were passing by, and absolutely there was reactions to it because it was an unexpected moment, and it did transform the entire experience. It's a very long tunnel, and then seeing something in the middle of it is kind of builds up an anticipation, and then passing through it was compelling. Yeah.
Yeah, so on that same piece, you mentioned simulating real-world lighting conditions. And so I'm curious if any of your projects involve redirecting or manipulating natural light.
Yeah, I'm interested in that, but for this project, actually, I started with measuring the quality of outside light, and then I was trying to translate those values into the light that is experienced in the space, and then I discovered that it's almost better to create a little bit more, I would say, theatrical interpretation of the outside light. The outside light, when it's very sunny, it's not really yellow, but it was very effective for me to use this type of light to simulate the warmth of the outside light. So it was, but I would like to use daylight, if that's the question. I would really like to work with daylight, and I have been working on some proposals for, I can talk a little bit about that, but using heliostats to harvest sunlight and also then direct it to special objects that I have been coating with different optical materials, so they diffract light. So that would be one example.
Right. If there are no other questions, let's thank our speaker one more time.
Thank you.
So Maya will be around this afternoon. Some of you guys have